Welcome to Our Family Stories, a podcast by Global Peace Women. We started this podcast to share our stories, the happy moments, the sad moments, the moments that give us deep insight. We hope that you learn just as much as we do in our conversations. In this episode, we will be talking about the traditional family cultures in Korea.
I'm really excited today. We have a special guest. I'll let her introduce herself. But we have a special guest, and I look forward to the conversation that we have today. We're going to specifically talk about some of these special traditions that happen in the Korean family. So please, Ms. Park, introduce yourself.
Okay. Hello, everybody. My name is Yeon Park. So working for the Global Peace Women International. So actually, I am the mother of two sons. So I live together with my two sons and my husband and my mother-in-law.
Nice.
So, but actually, I was grown up in South Korea. So Buyeogun is Chungcheongnam-do in South Korea. So maybe today's topic is about Korean tradition. I want to share this kind of Korean spiritual tradition today.
Very nice. Thank you. Shraddha.
Everyone, my name is Shraddha. I help share the wonderful stories that Global Peace Women has and collects on social media. And I'm looking forward to today's topic, which is an exciting one we haven't done before. Yes.
I'm Hanako. I work with Global Peace Women with Shraddha on a lot of the communication aspects to share the stories that happen or that we collect from families. I guess the thing that I'm most proud of, but also is the hardest thing in my life, are my 4 children. I have 3 sons and 1 daughter. And definitely always looking around for new notes on how to raise them better and how to make my family better. So I hope to glean a lot from today's conversation. Today, like I said in our introduction, we're going to talk a little bit about Korean family traditions. So in Global Peace Women, we talk a lot about the Korean dream, which is a term that comes from a book by Dr. Hyunjin Moon by the same name. And in it, he wrote something that always kind of sticks in my mind. He writes that the Korean extended family model has been perhaps the most outstanding feature of our culture. It offers a strong, supportive system that is intergenerational and extends outward to the clan, society, and the nation. It has been a powerful social good, nurturing and maintaining the most important qualities of Korean society throughout our history. So I hope that today we can get a first-person account of some of these special qualities of the Korean family. And I'm sure that many of them will resonate. Shraddha's from Nepal, right? I'm Japanese American, but I guess more American than Japanese, but I'm sure we'll be able to resonate with some of them, but also learn from some of them. So I really look forward to learning more. Usually in these podcasts, we start with sharing a short snippet from a past story. So I prepared a special one from one of your friends, Ms. Park. So let's take a look. It's about a tradition called Chuseok in Korea. I guess it's similar to a tradition that we have in Japan. I don't know, maybe in Nepal you have one too, but it's where families return home and honor their ancestors. So let's take a look.
Okay. Okay. Let me share my experiences regarding Korean tradition, like Chuseok, right? My father is the eldest son of 6 brothers and sisters in his family, right? So how important eldest sons roles in the family in Korea, right? So nowadays, many Korean family has become like nuclear families, and traditional extended families of the past has been decreased, and they are modernized, right? But the one thing, so we in Korea we keep these traditional customs, such as like ancestral ceremonies in Chuseok and Seollal, and so we gathered at the eldest son's house and celebrate and also remember our ancestors. So in that time, so when I was young, my father had ancestral rites and the anniversary about my great great grandparents, great grandparents, and grandparents, right? So it is very old tradition, right? But it is very hard to prepare the food, right? But it's very fun because since my father is the eldest son in our family, so every relative is gathered in my house. So my father, especially my mother, was the one who prepared these central ceremonies, So all the women in the extended family, including relatives, prepared food for our ancestors. The men, they prepared the ancestral rites, such as mowing and cleaning the cemetery of our ancestors, and with our utmost sincerity. Victoria, with our utmost sincerity means it a lot. It means a lot. So we call it 정성, right? So we prepared the food with 정성, and on the early morning of that ceremony day, everyone wears hanbok, Korean traditional clothes, or the cleanest clothes to perform the ceremony. So my father always told us story about our grandparents, great grandparents during the ceremony. For example, my great great grandfather, he was very tall and dignified and very handsome. And he was a great person who participated in the Donghak Peasant Revolution in Korea.
Really?
Yeah. So he probably told us his story. So why our family moved in Korea, in small town, what kind of people our great grandparents and grandparents were. So I could hear about our ancestors' story always, and my mother always wished for our family's health and success, our children and family, yes, and peace in the home and nation as during the ancestral ceremony, right? So I still have remember gathering my relatives watching the full moon in Chuseok, and we are making the songpyeon, the half moon shaped rice cake. So usually my mother said to me that if I make a songpyeon very well with a good shape, I will have a pretty daughter.
Ah.
I'm
No,
sorry to
no.
say, I was quite bad. to make a songpyeon. So maybe because of this kind of traditional custom and cultures, maybe Korean people, they are very proud of their ancestor. They know where they from and their values, right? So most of the Korean people know about Dangun mythology and Hongil Ingan ideal is our nation's founding principle. So they love peace vision that is inherited generation to generation. Right? So I think that is why Korean people have such a high self-esteem and proud of their origin and history, even though sometimes they might be too confident. Right? So one more example is when we have a newborn baby in the family, right? So you're gonna make a name, right? So usually in Korean people has 3 letters in their names. My name is Yeon Shin Park, right? So last name is the letter I received from my origin ancestor. Right? The middle letter of the name is the extended family's letters that comes from especially our extended family and relatives. And the last letter is the letter that represents myself. Right? So it means Yeon Park. Park means that is from ancestor, right? Yeon is from my extended family's name, right? Shin is represent myself. So maybe in looking through the Korean culture and traditions, we can see how much we serve the ancestor, how much we want to observe that tradition. Right? So maybe that is kind of a specialty in Korean families. Okay.
Those were any response, Shraddha?
Oh yeah, no, I related to what you were saying a lot because in polyculture, there's still I don't know the full details on what you need to do, all the rituals, but I know that every year whenever the dates of my grandparents, from my dad's side, their dates come up, their death anniversary. We have this little thing where instead of eating, the regular food and like incorporating meat, we do a very bland meal just to show our respect. And I don't know if that's a traditional Nepali like ceremony for death anniversaries, but I know it's something that me and my family have always done. And so just for those few days near their anniversary dates, we make sure to not include any meat and have a very simple meal. And I think my take on this is that we do that to show respect and just to show that the simplest things mean the most, and just to show a sign. And that's something we do with the anniversary dates. And for the newborns, we actually have a tradition too, where once the baby has hit the 6 months mark, we have this like little celebration and give them a new name, kind of like something that like later on they'll use when they get married, because we believe we use a lot of priests in all those rituals. And so that name will be later on used when they're about to get married, just so like they can match up the people with the person that they'll be with. And so it's very similar, but it's also different. So it's like the little combination. It's like every region or every area has their own special take on things. So when you were saying the whole name, I was like, wow, we have something similar too. But yeah.
I really appreciate how even in the name, there's this sense of connectivity with past and present and future. It makes you think about how you live your life, because someday you're going to be the past part that people are going to talk about And what are they going to say? Are they going to say good things, or are they going to be like, we don't talk about that one? We'll talk about somebody else. Yeah. So, but it also gives you a sense of identity, I think, of where you come from. What other ways do you try to hand down I guess, the virtues that are connected to Honikingan? Are there other traditions? You mentioned Chuseok as one way where you talk about the the precedents or the things that are passed downable from your ancestors as one way of understanding what this value of Honikingan are. Are there other ways, like in what mom teaches the children of what is right and wrong, or how you run the family, or stories that you tell?
So actually, very old-fashioned Korean families, extended families, they have their own family's motto, like live honestly or live for the sake of others, like that. In some old house, we can see that some framed family mottos, right? So that is from our ancestors' word. Right? So maybe sometimes my father taught us about, so you should live in this way like your ancestors, right? So it's yeah. So during the like a Chuseok or special family gathering, so we're talking about our families. So in Korea we have like a family, like a genealogical record book, right? Family tree book, right? So in there I can see my name and my husband, right? So my grandparents, great parents' name there, right? So always my father proudly show that book, and this is where you are from. So you should keep in mind our family's mottos, right? So through the generation to generation in the way, so historically we can inherit that 통일인간 or the peace vision in our family cultures.
Wow.
Yeah, but some modernized family, they like to have a ceremony and preparing food, right? So there are very good things and bad things, but I think at least we are keeping in that tradition, right? So that's why we can inherit that spirit into our next generation.
Do you have a story that can you share one of the stories your father used to share about your grandfather?
Oh, yes. Usually, yeah, so in Korean people, we overcome many wars, right? By said history, right? So maybe, so my great grandfathers, he participated in the Donghak uh, revolution, right? So maybe that is why our family escaped from our hometown to the Puyok. Our hometown, right? So that from there we started to survive. So, but always my father of our ancestors, because we are very poor, but we have such a good spirit and want to have a peace in the world. So that kind of spirit he always emphasized to me. So, and about our grandparents, because they passed away in the early age, so I could not see. They are very diligent and take care the family, especially the 정성 is very special meaning in Korea. So in my mother case, she always has in the waters in the bowl, right? And then play something, right? Not specific religion, but she always play for the family and country, right? So maybe that kind of that is from my grandparents, I think. So they naturally think about the origin and God. So not the way of religion, but naturally know about that way. So they pray and make a wish and try to live in honestly and right. So yeah, I respect that point much.
So, yeah, Ms. Park, let's talk a little bit about Cheongsong because it's
Yeah,
a fascinating concept.
Yeah, so when I was young, my family was very poor. So there's no heating system in our kitchen. It is outside. So to make food in the winter, oh my God, we don't have any hot water. So to prepare the ancestral ceremony, so we need to clean all the house. We have to clean the food and make a food with the clean waters, right? With our secret recipe, right? So it was very hard, very too cold. So when I was young, in a child, I thought, oh, why we should do in that way? What's the meaning of this? But now I understand the heart of my mother and fathers. So that kind of 정성 and sincerity, they wish our family's futures and peace in the home, right? So now I have 2 children. That's why I understand that one. Yeah, always in the early morning, she got up early and played and start to cook and cleaning, right? In winter. So that was when I look back on my mother's always, I always cry because I know how much she loved, but the love is not just love. She put everything for us with sincerity. That is 정성, right? So children, they feel that they are looking, they're watching the father and mothers, how they are doing, right? They learn through their back of mothers and fathers. So that is very touching. I don't know how to explain my feelings, right? So maybe in Nepal and other countries has the same, some spiritual heart. I don't know about mothers and grandmothers and fathers. How much they give effort for the family and community. Right? That is not rational way, but just I can feel that, right?
No, I think, it's amazing because today I actually heard a story about my grandmother, and this is the same exact scenario where I don't know if there's a specific term in Nepali, but today my mom she was cooking something today, and she was talking to me about how one of her cousins, he was a big eater. So every time he would visit, he'd always go in the kitchen and be like, is there anything to eat? And she would always say how my grandma was she is the type of person who always sacrificed and like put other people before herself first. And so even if there wasn't a lot of food left, she would always say, oh yes, like there's food, like here you go. And she would give up even her plate of food, knowing that there's not going to be enough for her. And my mom was telling me this story, and she was saying, every time I cook this dish, I always think of my mom and how she is this type of person. And I told my mom, every time I hear about these scenarios, I think of her. And so it's this like little chain reaction that goes on, and it's very heartwarming to realize that while your mom thinks of her mom, you end up thinking of your mom, and it's just it's this little connection that you have going, and it doesn't ever go away. It's just builds up and builds up. But yeah, it was when you told me the term and explained it, I was like, wow, I just heard of the story today.
Yeah. Oh man. Yeah. So your grandma Shara and Miss Park's mom and her grandma, I think there's something universal about the heart of a mom that just says Changso. It's not rational, but it's my heart, and I'm gonna do everything to express it to you. Are there any traditions that you have now in your nuclear family, Miss Park, that help you express Changsong to your kids?
Yeah. Yeah. So maybe whenever we visit our hometown, yes, I visit my mother's grave and talking about her story. And yeah, so yeah, this summer our family will go to visit our hometown again.
Nice.
So we're gonna listen about my father's story, right? I think that is the best way to teach my children about our ancestors and our history and our spirit, like that. Right? So that is why I think extended family system is very important. Right? As a single family, as a nuclear family, we cannot learn about our ancestors, our traditions.
You mentioned extended family. I think that's the last thing I wanted to talk about in today's session. Every time I go, I have similar experiences, usually with older ladies giving me advice. So if you could talk a little bit more about that extended family culture, that's kind of like Hanminjok, like one people, right?
Yeah, Korean older ladies we called Ajumma. They are very powerful. They're powerful.
Everybody's their children.
They take care of everybody. Ajoshi, we call the
Ajushi.
man Ajoshi. Yeah, Oji-san means like Ajoshi is like not like intimacy like Ajumma, but they always help when we have some trouble in the community.
So like auntie,
auntie, yeah.
Ajumma.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting because in Nepal, we also have the system where we don't call each other by their names, because in our culture, it's considered very rude. And it's like, why don't you treat other people with respect? So anyone older than us, it's kind of hard to tell if they're going to be an auntie or a grandma, or a sister. But for grandmas or people who look like they could be your grandma's age, we say ama. And that's usually with the whole ajuma is like, there are a lot of amas in Nepal too. And then for people who could look like your aunt, it would be just auntie. And that's the more friendlier term. If you call someone who looks like they could be a grandma, auntie, they're very flattered, and they're like, oh. I know I look young. And then for old people who could be your older sister, I think that's the most common way for younger people. They'll just say Didi for older sisters and Dai for older brothers.
Dai.
and there's uncle and bua for grandpa. So it's very similar because it's just, rather than asking them for their name, they're just very friendly and they just address you by grandma, grandpa, auntie, uncle. It's just like one family instead of just strangers. But yeah, it's very similar.
We talked a lot about a lot of things, about the importance of, I guess, setting a good tradition that starts from your ancestry and moves on into the future, but every generation's responsibility in upholding the values, like in Korea of Honikingan, and of the desire for peace and of living well. We talked about even in the small traditions of not just setting the table or the cleaning the house during Chuseok, or even the naming of your children or cooking food. There's this sense of cheongsong, or investing your whole heart into the people that you love, both past and present. And then we talked about this sense of extended family in the way you address each other, but also in the way you treat each other. So I think I learned a lot about how this ethic of Honik Ingan that kind of seemed like just a concept is actually daily practice in the Korean traditional family, but also in a lot of other countries like Nepal. Usually we have the guest of honor go last, so we'll have Shraddha go first. Yeah. Okay, you can think of your closing comments while she's.
We'll give you more time. Something I realized again was that no matter what country you're from and what nationality you are, at the end of the day, it's all very similar, even if there are a few different tweaks in your traditions or your within your families. It's all just, as Global Peace Movement, Global Peace Foundation, just one family under God. And it's just, no matter where you go, you get this sense of belonging within one another, within a few friends that you make, within family members. And you just practice this ideology of just, communication, peace building, sharing with one another. And it just envelops into this ideology of peace beginning in the home once again. And it always does start in the home, because that's where you learn from, that's where you grow up, and that's where you take what you learn and teach it to others and share it there. So again, today I realized that Mrs. Park's stories and Haneko's stories and my stories, they're all very similar, just slightly different. But at the end of the day, they're all kind of within from the same ground up.
Mm-hmm. Well, Ms. Park, you can close us out with your thoughts.
Yeah, so I think we can find the same common cultures in each nation's families, right? So maybe how about we can start to make new cultures, new daily life customs, or some special things. Like as a family, we can make wish letters together. We can make a family motto together, or catchphrase together. So as a family, whatever we imagine, we can make good cultures in our family around the world. So that is the starting point, I think. The global peace movement.
Nice. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us for this episode. Make sure to subscribe and tune in next time.